I think impartiality is more layered, more complex, and more difficult, Peter, than I think the way you've characterized it.
Yes, I think it is possible to find rather broad, abstract universal principles of morality. And I think a generalized version of the golden rule is such a principle. So it's obviously not enough for a basic moral principle to say, put yourself in the position of someone else, because there are many situations in which many people are involved, and not only human beings, but also non-human animals are involved. So I think the correct principle, really, that I think is more or less universal, is we should put ourselves in the position of all of those affected by our actions. Try to take on what the impact of our choice, if we're facing an ethical choice, is for everyone affected, weighing their interests impartially, considering what those interests are.
So I think there may be some disagreement here. I think impartiality is more layered, more complex, and more difficult, Peter, than I think the way you've characterized it. There's a question of impartiality about people's interests. Should everyone's well-being count equally? And I'm inclined to say the answer to that is yes, and that's a form of impartiality. But people also are valuers. They don't just have interests, they evaluate what's in people's interests. And should everybody's views about what counts as people's interests be taken equally? Is that a kind of impartiality? Well, that's very hard to do, and it has very concrete consequences, and it becomes really difficult to know how to behave very quickly. One example, when I was growing up, one of my best friends was an evangelical Christian. I am an atheist Jew. Now, how was she supposed to treat me impartially? On the one hand, if she cared for my interests impartially, she should devote a great deal of energy to converting me out of my current set of beliefs towards hers, because from her sincere perspective, my eternal soul was at stake. On the other hand, if she behaved towards me in that way, I might have a legitimate gripe that she's disrespecting me in a certain way as a valuer, because she is treating my views as false and therefore not worthy of the same respect that her true views have. On the other hand, it's really, really hard to treat views that you think are false with the same respect that you accord views that you think are true. So now what does one do? Well, that's very difficult. And I think that's why something like impartiality doesn't quickly get us to a solution to this problem. My own view, and maybe we'll get into this eventually, is that what we need is a politics, an intersubjective set of practices and processes that enable us to have this fight in a way that's not destructive, but productive.
It's really important to distinguish between trying to make up our own minds as to what we think is the right thing to do, the ethical choice, if you like, and the politics of the process of how we are going to reach decisions in a large society, decisions for the society as a whole. And these are different questions. I mean, they're certainly related, but there may be moral choices that I make that are not political choices. They're choices that I decide, what am I going to do with my money? Am I going to assist people in extreme poverty by finding an effective charity that is helping them and donate to that? What am I going to eat? Am I going to eat products from factory farms and be complicit in the suffering inflicted on animals there? Or am I going to avoid those products? They're not political choices. Although, certainly my views might lead me to politics in terms of advocating that government policy help do more to help people in poverty and prohibit factory farming. But those are then separate choices. When we're making the ethical choices, that's up to us.
I think, Peter, we actually have a disagreement. I wonder whether that's right. A relationship has the feature that no person's perspective on it is the whole relationship.
Right.
Instead, it's intersubjective and it can't be reduced to either person's participation in it. Well, and I'm inclined to say a legal process or a political process is the same. In a trial, you have the prosecution, the defense, and the judge. Who has the right perspective on it? None of them. It's a process that balances them out. And that one way to think about this is we need to construct relationships and processes that we can each participate in from our own perspective, while also understanding that our perspective on them isn't the whole of them. And that's partly this curiosity point. Now, I wonder whether, I think if one thinks in that way, there is, though, some disagreement with something that you said, Peter. You said, ethically, morally, I judge for me. And I'm a little more skeptical of that, even in the simplest case of ethics, which is to say, it's always the case that when I think that there's a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do, I will be embedded in a context, a situation, and other people. And it may not be political in the sense that the personal is political. It may be, but it may not be. But it's always the case that there are other perspectives on what I'm doing too. And I'm inclined to the view that I should always dampen my own views on account of these other perspectives and never simply do what I think is best.
Daniel was saying that he and I disagreed about, and that is, whether, in what way we respect other people's values when we disagree. So what I think we should take into account is...
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.